Hi guys, today's recipe comes from Kevin's Kitchen, my just published cookbook. I'm going to make the butternut squash soup located right here on page 92. I've actually made this soup at least twice a year, every year for the past 14 years. It's great for wintertime dinner parties, and it makes a fabulous first course for both Thanksgiving and Christmas. Anyway, I hope you'll buy the book, and I hope you'll try the soup. So the first thing we need is a hefty 3.5 to 4 pound butternut squash. And we have to peel this sucker. And I know some people like to use common vegetable peelers. Other people like to take a knife and just cut straight down. But I found when you use a knife, you end up losing maybe a quarter of the squash. So get yourself one of these Y-shaped vegetable peelers, and you'll have an easy time peeling the squash. So first, slice off the stem end, throw it into a purple bowl, and then take your Y-shaped vegetable peeler and go to town. And by the way, I did not grow this squash, but I have grown butternut squash in the past in my little kitchen garden, and to save space, I grew it vertically up a wire mesh fence. And the interesting thing about winter squash is that the vines seem to have their own intelligence. They know that if they're going to spread out, they need only to make very thin stems. But if they're growing vertically, the stems become really thick so they can support the heavy fruit. So I guess winter squash has a rather high IQ. Now we have to get the seeds out of the squash. And I very often will just take a meat cleaver and a mallet and go right down the middle. But not everybody has a meat cleaver. Not everybody is comfortable using a meat cleaver. So I'm going to try doing it just with a regular chef's knife. And straight down, like so. Voila! And then you take a soup spoon, I'll grab mine, and just scoop out the seeds. And by the way, you can save the butternut squash seeds and clean them and roast them just as you would pumpkin seeds. They're really delicious. Okay, then you want to cut off this little stem end. I'll do that from each one. And then I'm going to cut the kind of the bulbous ends off. And we want to just roughly slice the squash into 1-inch pieces or so. This soup is particularly wonderful because it contains not only caramelized squash, but smoky bacon and smooth medium dry sherry. It's totally delicious. Even when I serve it as a first course, almost everybody asks for seconds. It's a wonder there's any room for the turkey at Thanksgiving. Then grab a large baking sheet, throw the squash onto the sheet. And are we in view here? Are we on, you can see this? Okay, good. I'm talking to my Andy Milford, who's shooting this video. And then grab some olive oil, and you want to coat it. You want to coat the squash so that it glistens, because glistening squash will caramelize or color beautifully in the oven. And as it colors, it becomes naturally sweet. And then this goes into a preheated 375-degree oven for 50 to 60 minutes, usually just 50 minutes, until it's perfectly tender and it turns a golden color. So I'll be right back. Then get yourself about 8 slices of bacon. I use center cut bacon, but you could use any bacon you happen to have. And just cut it into thin lardons, just little strips like this. And again, they don't have to be any particular size. This soup will end up being pureed in a blender. Then add a little glug of olive oil to a heavy pot. I'm using my purple Le Creuset Dutch oven. It's a 5-quart pot. And then add the bacon. And give it a little stir with a green spatula. And let the bacon cook until it renders its fat. That will take, 5 to 8 minutes. Okay, so my bacon has rendered its fat. So now is the time to chop up 2 large onions. And I already chopped mine. And not to toot my own horn, but I actually grew these onions last summer. So in they go. And these 2 get a little stir into the bacon fat. And then add 1 heaping teaspoon of thyme. I'm using dried thyme. You could use fresh chopped leaves if you'd like. And a ½ teaspoon of kosher salt. Let me double check that that's a ½ teaspoon. Yes, ½ teaspoon. Then give the works a little stir. Cover the pot. Lower the heat. And let the onions sweat until they're soft and translucent, but not at all colored. This will take, 15 to 20 minutes. Okay. The onions seem perfectly tender. So for this next step, I'm going to transfer the bacon and onion mixture into a blender, like so. You'll need 5 cups of low or no sodium chicken stock for this recipe. So add to the blender 1 cup of chicken stock, and then hook it up to the motor base. I'm using a Vitamix blender, but you could use any ordinary blender. Doesn't have to be a high-end blender. And let her rip. You're aiming for a smooth puree here. Let's have a look at this. Perfect. Okay. Meanwhile, wash out and dry the cooking pot. Then pour the pureed bacon and onion mixture into the cleaned out soup pot. And you don't have to wash out the blender jar because we're going to be using it again for the squash. So I'll just move this over here for a moment and grab the squash. And by the way, you can roast the squash several days ahead of time so that it's ready to go. And then you put all of the squash into the blender. You might want to eat one of the pieces. Delicious. And then clear the decks. And put actually before I do this, so you can see, add another cup of the chicken stock to the squash. And hook it up to your motor base. And once again, let it go. I noticed some of the squash is not getting pureed, and that's because I didn't add enough liquid. So I just add a little more. This will work. Done. Ooh, this looks great. Let me show you. Sumptuous. And then we add all of this puree to the bacon and onion mixture. Make sure to get all of it in there. Give it a stir and watch that white onion mixture suddenly turn a beautiful shade of beta-carotene orange. Then add the remaining chicken stock and exactly 1/3 cup of heavy cream. And my favorite ingredient, exactly 1/2 cup of medium dry sherry. And this is medium dry sherry, I think is usually called Amontillado. I don't know if you can see that. Sherry has a very smooth taste and aroma, and it's absolutely wonderful in this soup. And then you could pop this in the refrigerator if you like, or you can go ahead and cook it right now, as I'm going to do. So bring the soup to a simmer and be sure to taste it just to correct your seasonings if necessary. It's good, but it needs a little more salt. And a few grinds of black pepper. And grab a fresh spoon. Cleanliness counts, my friends. And taste again. Oh, this is fabulous. Oh, I can't wait to serve this on Thanksgiving. And again, you can make this soup many days in advance. You can even freeze it, although you might want to leave the cream out if you plan to freeze it. And then when you reheat it, add the heavy cream. You could add more sherry at that time too. So I'm going to let this simmer for a minute, and then I'll pour it into a bowl and do another taste test. So there are 3 ways to serve this soup. For a swanky dinner party, you might want to use a 2-handled bouillon cup. I found these cups at an antique shop in Boston and bought an entire set of them. They're really wonderful. They're lovely, turquoise, with little roses and things. And they don't hold much soup, which is perfect for a first course. That way people don't gorge themselves on soup before you've served the turkey. And all it needs is a little drizzle of cream for garnish. And with two-handled bouillon cups, you don't even need a spoon. According to Emily Post, you just lift the bouillon cup by both of its handles and sip. If you're serving this soup for breakfast, and believe me, it is delicious for breakfast, just put it in a mug. This is great for leftover soup. And nuke it in the microwave if it's cold. If it's leftover soup, it will be cold. Nuke it in the microwave for 1.5 minutes. And this one too, kind of made a mess here. Give it a little drizzle of cream. Can you tell that I like heavy cream? And if you're serving it for lunch or as a main course, along with a hunk of good French bread, just put it into a regular old soup bowl and enjoy it as a main course for dinner or lunch. Emily Post says, when you're eating soup, always scoop the spoon away from you. It's delicious, no matter what you serve the soup in. And you can even dip your crusty baguette into the soup and enjoy that too. Well, I hope you'll try this soup someday. And again, if you want to find all kinds of easy, elegant recipes, you'll find them right in this, my very first and currently only cookbook. I'll post a link in the description box below so you'll know where to order it. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.